Hello everyone. Thank you for inviting me to have today's presentation. So this is very recent research findings in the transportation and air quality research group at the University of Toronto. We basically explore the triple burden of social disadvantage, mobility poverty, and exposure to traffic-related air pollution in Toronto. So transportation is a main source of greenhouse gas emissions. The figure on the slide shows the greenhouse gas emission inventory for Greater Toronto and the Hamilton area. And basically tell us that 32% of total greenhouse gas emission come from transportation sector. And this means that decarbonizing transportation is a crucial element of climate mitigation, which can be achieved by investment in low to zero emission vehicles, as well as alternative transportation mode, including biking, walking, also public transportation system. So transportation is also a major contribution to near road air pollution, especially in urban environment. And when we talk about commute level exposure, which means the air pollution concentration that you breathe while you commute across the area throughout of the day, whether you take public transit or bike or walk, or even you drive in your car, those the air pollution concentration that you are exposed to. And this commute level exposure actually accounts for a large portion of your daily dose of air pollutants, because air pollution level are pretty high, especially in near road urban environments. So air pollution in urban environments are influenced by many factors, including local emission sources, built environment, land use, and also meteorology conditions. And in fact, regional air quality has improved a lot in the past 2 decades. And we observe notable reductions in critical air pollutants, including PM2.5, NOx, CO, SO2. So the figure here shows the decreasing trend of those critical air pollutants that are well regulated and monitored. The decreasing trend is from 2005 to 2019. However, there are other emerging air pollutants that are not regulated, like black carbon and also today's presentation focus ultrafine particles. So we still observe pollution hotspots near busy roads and also local sources, such as large transportation infrastructure, like the warehouse or distribution center. So this is a map of the Toronto. We do the air pollution prediction, and the green area means lower value, red color means higher value, and I will present this map later on as well. So as I mentioned earlier, this research study is mainly focused on ultrafine particles. So those are the smallest particle with diameters lower than 0.1 micrometer. So which means that they can very easily penetrate throughout the lungs, brains, and other organs compared to PM2.5 and PM10. And there are emerging epidemiology studies that demonstrate the associations between UFP exposures and certain respiratory cardiovascular disease, and also certain type cancers as well. And a more recent study have shown that UFP exposures have negative impacts on vulnerable population group, such as senior people or the children. However, ambient UFP concentrations are not monitored by the air quality station, and it is not regulated yet. So before diving into today's presentation, I want to first provide with you the key takeaways from today's presentation or this research finding. So basically, we found that there's a large disparities in accessing sustainable transportation infrastructure, such as biking, walking, or public transit, and particularly for communities with more immigrants and senior people. And secondly, we found that people who use active transportation modes experience higher UFP levels compared to vehicle users. And thirdly, we found that disadvantaged communities are exposed to higher UFP levels. And lastly, in this study, we developed a community prioritization index, or called CPI, to identifying those most disadvantaged communities across City of Toronto for policy and intervention action. So here is the structure of the methodology or data sources used in this study. So this is the ultrafine particle concentration map. So basically, we conduct mobile measurement campaigns across the City of Toronto. We collect the data. We build machine learning models using different predictors, and eventually we come up with this map. And this map shows like different levels of ultrafine particles. And we can see that the red color, which indicating higher UFP levels, mainly occurred along the highways and also certain arterial roads, as well as areas with high population area, like the CBD or the downtown Toronto. And we also have the travel patterns of individuals from travel survey data. In Toronto, we collect transportation tomorrow survey data that can provide those information. By combining these two, we know where people go on our typical day, and we know the air pollution concentration. Eventually, we can get the mobility weighted exposures. And at the same time, we can get social economic data from sensors data. So by combining all those information together, we can do mobility justice and environmental justice analysis. So that's the idea how this study is carried on. So first, let's start with the air pollution part. So our research group at U of T collaborate with a Toronto-based sensor manufacturer company called Centroid. We co-design and co-develop this urban scanner mobile platform that can capture high-resolution, real-time air pollution, urban heat, and hyperlocal meteorological conditions. And here you can see that we have a computer that's installed in the trunk and stream all the data to the cloud. And at the same time, we have camera, 360-degree camera, and also LiDAR sensors on the top of the car. So one novelty of this study is that we train deep learning models and computer vision techniques to extract information from images that captured on the street. So this is the images that captured by the urban scanner car. I think this is King Street. And here just a demonstration. Basically, we use two different models to derive very local information in terms of like traffic characteristics, and also like roadways, vegetation coverage, also like the sky view area, etc. And here we focus on classify truck types, because diesel trucks generally are the high emitters for air pollution, which will lead to air pollutant spikes in urban environments. And besides from air pollution that we measured, we also, as I mentioned earlier, we got socio-economic data. So basically, we download data from Ontario Marginalization Index. This report is published by Public Health Ontario. It covers different factors, including residential condition, income level, proportion of senior and young people, as well as proportion of recent immigrants. And we also at the same time, we download the accessibility to sustainable transportation infrastructure from WalkScore website. probably you have come across this website previously. Basically, when you want to find some place to live, it tells how easily you can have access to different active transportation mode. So since we all live here, I guess we are familiar with this idea that Toronto is indeed an immigrant hub. Over 45% of residents are foreign-born. And previous studies shown that there's a disparity in transit usage. Basically, 36% of recent immigrants rely on transit, while only 21% of Canadian-born are transit commuters. However, in our study, we try to compare this accessibility score across these communities with population proportions of immigrants. So the y-axis here shows the accessibility score ranging from 0 to 100. Basically, higher value indicates higher or better accessibility to sustainable transportation infrastructure. And the x-axis here is different community groups. So 1 indicates the community with fewer immigrants, and the 5 indicates there are more immigrants in the community. So by comparing these 5 box plots, we can find that the immigrants communities have lower accessibility to sustainable transport compared to the first group circled here, which by about 20%. And similarly, we found that the community with more senior people also have about 21% lower accessibility score compared to community with fewer senior people. So this is very frustrated because access barrier will significantly influence senior people's quality of life. Obviously, also will reduce their community participation, as well as will increase their or bring higher transportation cost burden to them. And here we compare air pollution exposure among different transportation mode users. So the y-axis here is the air pollution exposure level. Higher values means higher concentration levels that you are exposed to, which means a worse scenario, right? And the x-axis here is different transportation mode users. The first one is active transportation user, and the last one is auto transportation users. So basically here it shows that when we compare those 2 groups, we found that those who do not generate emissions, basically the first group, or namely like pedestrians and cyclists, are exposed to higher UIP levels than those who actually travel in vehicles, shown in the last group here. And as I mentioned earlier, in this study, we developed this community participation index, CPI, that incorporates all 3 dimensions, including UIP exposures, social disadvantage, and accessibility to sustainable transportation infrastructure. And based on this value, we ranked the communities. And the one that highlight in red in this map are the ones that we think that should be prioritized or with great concerns, since they are near major infrastructure, and we found that actually those communities are located near major infrastructure nodes and also large distribution centers, like this one, very close to the Pearson Airport. And as I mentioned earlier, that in this study, we trained the deep learning model to classify different truck types. So here, the figure on the right shows the spatial distribution of combination trucks. Those are the trucks that provide like intercity freight movements. So that's why the green color indicates very low value or 0 combination trucks. And the black color basically shows the high volume of the combination trucks that traveling along the highways. That's what we expected. But if we put these 2 maps side by side, when we compare the patterns of red area in this map with the black lines shown in this map, we find they have very similar spatial patterns. So one of research assistants, she visits one of these locations that highlight in the black circle here, and those are the photos that she took in that neighborhood. So we can see that there are lots of large combination trucks. So which basically confirms our findings that communities that suffer from triple burden are the neighborhoods that face less green space, higher industry areas, and higher number of trucks. And so basically, this is the last of my presentation. And our study basically tells us that it's important to quantify the disparity and identify the most disadvantaged community. And those ones suffer from triple burden should be prioritized for future policy and interventions. And thank you for joining me today. And I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Junshi. Really interesting and complex stuff, but simply explained. So thank you very much. Really interesting to see. Maybe at this point, maybe stop sharing, and then we can think about some questions. So we have a few minutes still. I can see there's questions coming online already. So if you do have questions in the room or online, Junshi's got a few minutes to answer them. We're going to go online first. So Junshi, do you want to come around here, and then you can kind of be on this camera as well? Han, who have we got a question from? Han will be helping us with the online.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So we first have a question in the chat. So sorry if I'm butchering your name. Sabel says, how much can your research be used to apply to tracking wildfire smoke impacts?
The smoke, Max? Oh, okay. So, okay, that's a very good question. So actually, these are ongoing research projects I'm working on. So, indeed, this year, in the last summer, between June and August, we conducted a not very large mobile monitoring campaign across the city of Toronto, and we indeed detect very strong signal or the impact from the wildfire, and we measure different air pollutants like PM2.5, PM10, ultrafilament particles, and that's what I'm working on now, and trying to investigate like the impacts of those extreme events, like the wildfire.
Thank you. We also have 3 other questions online, but just want to ask if we want to go to the in-person people, or should we still?
I think carry on online for now, Han.
Okay. And then we have a question from Jonathan.
So just great presentation and great question, Sibel. As a follow-up, extreme weather impacts, it's very dynamic. And then you mentioned about communities that are vulnerable. Have you considered like how the city might finance prioritizing those communities with the data that you're providing?
I think so. This study basically identifying the communities that are located in those areas, like the very close to the distribution center, like warehouse, or along the highways. I think so because in this study we demonstrate 3 different dimensions, like the air pollution exposure, and also like accessibility to sustainable transportation infrastructure. So from the intervention from the government, I think should be more focused on like improve the accessibility, especially, and also make sure there are strategies or like the plans that can reduce like the exposures as well, like certain let's say to optimize the freight movements in certain times of day, so that when people are working outside, they can make sure they have not exposed to very high air pollution spikes.
Awesome. And then we have a question from Ingrid. So Ingrid asks, has anything like this been done for noise? Where can we access your information?
Yeah, so for this study, we don't install like the noise sensors, unfortunately. So the main reason for that, I think, is that at the beginning when we designed this study, we install all the sensors on the top of our urban scanner platform, and we think that the noise may be influenced by other vibrations of sensors or other factors, so which may not provide very crucial information. But I do know that there are studies that coverage at the Rising University that they conduct like fixed site noise measurement, and those can provide like spatial distribution of noise.
Thank you.
And I think lastly, we have a follow-up question from Sabel. They ask, can you integrate your data with existing crowdsourced data? For example, IQ air data.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So indeed, actually, we think about to expand this study or like the usage or the use case for the data that we explore. So basically, we so as I mentioned, that there's another study also conducted by me, so by our research group. So basically, we develop prediction model that they use in images, and those images are can be captured by anyone's phone, and we can make prediction on air pollution level, like the low, medium, and high with certain accuracy. And here, the air quality data that's published online are the ones that's measured using fixed science station. So basically, in Toronto, there are about 5 air quality stations across the city of Toronto. But the advantage of this study is that we use mobile measurements. So basically, we have larger coverage, and we focus on ultrafine particles, which are not measured by the fixed site stations yet. So, but we can integrate our other data, like the PM2.5, PM10, with fixed site station data. There are also studies that are trying to integrate those data sources together.
Cool. I realize we have two more questions online, but just want to check in, Jamie, if that's fine with the in-person folks. Okay.
No, you go ahead. That's good. That's good.
Okay, we have a question from Chatu. They asked, is it international, the lack of accessible transportation in areas where freight and container trucks frequent?
Is it intentional? So we try to, so we develop this accessibility to different sustainable transportation infrastructure. And we noticed that actually those are the areas that have freight and container trucks, which makes sense because which means would be harder for people to walk around or also cycle around. So, but it's not, I don't think it's intentional, but if we plot the spatial distribution of different accessibility of different transportation modes individually, like the accessibility to bike infrastructure, accessibility to walking, to public transit, actually have different patterns. So here we integrate all together and as one accessibility score, which shows this kind of like correlation or like the association.
Cool, thank you. And then we have a question from John.
Thank you. It's my experience, a couple of things. It's my experience that living in the far west of Toronto, for bicycles, particularly for traveling on bicycles, there's effectively a barrier between basically roughly between Lakeshore and Bloor Street. There are very few streets that are comfortably cyclable that will take you from Lakeshore to as far north as Bloor. Basically because because very few streets cross either the QEW or the the QEW and the Queensway, and most of those are very much car-centric or transport truck-centric. And the other comment that the question I have is, have you considered doing work on fostering a safety culture, particularly in transport? Because particularly in freight transport, because a great deal of the problem with active transportation, both pedestrian and cycling, is just flat out plain dangerous driving. I could tell you the story about about returning from a memorial ride and riding down I think it was riding down Keele Street and encountering a truck with a cube van with the driver puffing on a very large blunt marijuana joint, and thinking that was a pretty good metaphor for the state of traffic safety in this city.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree with you. Like the presence of heavy duty trucks or all kinds of trucks definitely will influence like the safety of the active transportation users. But this is not my research field or my research focus, because my research is more related to environment exposure and also emission and air quality. But yeah, I totally agree with you. Yeah, there's a very important angle to investigate the impacts of the different type of trucks on the safety. Yeah.
All right, thank you. We have 2 questions, maybe even 3, 4 in the room. Okay, I'm not sure we're going to be able to go around to them all as we are running out a little bit of time, but we are going to take a couple from the floor here, if that's all right. David, would you do the honors with the microphone, please?
No, you think.
Let's go over here to Ben first.
All right.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. So I just want to clarify, in your map of sort of zones and exposure, how much of that is you're modeling it based on features? Like, so this area is next to a highway, so we expect it to have these numbers, versus how much is being modeled based on your actual samples, either of the air itself or the computer vision of, we saw this many trucks on this street, so we expect that the exposure will be X. And my other question is, have you looked at whether how strongly zoning is predictive of air quality? Because if it's pretty one-to-one, then it seems like an easy policy solution to understand, at least. But if it's actually not matching up with zoning, it seems like it would be more complicated for policymakers to understand how to address it. Thanks.
So for first question, I did not show here, but actually in my supplementary slides. So in this study, we designed 20 driving routes across the city of Toronto that try to cover everywhere in Toronto, and like the west, east, downtown, north, etc. And so basically have very good coverage. We developed the algorithm to cover different built environment, land use, transportation infrastructure, etc. And then we build this model, use land use variables, and also track information, or the traffic information to make prediction. But for this map, we do not use traffic or like the vehicles that as predictors in the model. But I first mentioned another study that encouraged probably can be used in crowdsourcing platform. In that way, we can let the public use their phone to make photos and then upload their images, and then we can make predictions using their images. That study, we use the information from the all the information from the images. Yeah, but here we just show the a similar spatial pattern between the image, the combination chart and the most disadvantaged communities. And your second question is about zoning. So in this study, we use dissemination area. So basically, this is about the area that includes about 400 to 700 people within each dissemination area, and we try to align all those data sources within this dissemination area level.
Thank you, Junshi. I think that might be all we have time